Groovy.
Hey everybody, Jim here with another bunch of Sega Saturn import recommendations, and if I do say so myself, the Saturn is a great console to collect imports for. There is a very large library of games for it that were only released in Japan, and a lot of them are quality titles, so let's get started. Also, today I wanted to kind of mix up the various gameplay styles, so I hope everybody appreciates that. We're going to get started with a little bit of video pinball. This is Q10 Kai.
And this is a game that was developed and published by Technosoft, which is a company that pretty much everybody associates with the Thunder Force series, but they actually made a whole bunch of other games and other genres, and this is a good example of them playing around with a different genre of games. I will say right off the bat that I'm not like a huge pinball fan. It's never something I've been really into. But this game actually kind of keeps it interesting as far as a video pinball game goes. Essentially, on the main board you have Earth, Heaven, and Hell, and the ball goes between the three different levels. Obviously, if you drop down into the lava, you lose a life. But essentially, the goal of the game is to hit the bumpers on the screen in a certain way that they open up different areas of the board, and then you smack the ball into those areas, and then you go into a boss fight, which all the boss fights basically play like pinball mini games, and they're a lot of fun. And after you defeat all of the bosses on the board, you go to a final boss to complete the game. And I've actually never made it to the final boss because actually getting to play against the different bosses in the game is kind of a tall order, because the bumpers serve as kind of like slot machine bumpers, so it's actually kind of tricky to unlock the bosses, but just that makes the game like extra fun for me, trying to actually get to play all those different bosses. Also, you have 3 different characters to choose from that have different power-ups for the ball that, you know, change the gameplay up a bit. So one character, the ball can turn into like a sword basically that goes flying around the screen. There's or it could be a fireball, or it can be like a turtle shell, I guess, that hits everything like multiple times and gives you big point boosts. So I do like that. I like that for a pinball game. It actually mixes things up a bit, throws in some extra gameplay mechanics that keep it fun. Also, the graphics are really good. They're extremely colorful. I love the character designs. It has a very like cute anime look to it, which I like, and the soundtrack is excellent. Each character has their own specific song that plays while you're playing as them, and all 3 of them are great. And then there's the other music in the game that plays during the menus and the game over, whatever it is, the whole soundtrack is really good. So the graphics, sound design, and gameplay make this one more fun than just your average video pinball game. And if you go looking for a copy online, it's not terribly expensive, maybe between 30 and 50 bucks, I'd think. So if you're a pinball fan, if you like a good video pinball game, then this is something I would recommend for you.
Q10 Kai, very colorful and fun video pinball game. I would recommend picking this one up if you are indeed a pinball fan. Next up, a really outstanding puzzle game by Data East. This is Magical Drop 3.
And this is a puzzler by Data East, and I will say that right off the bat, this is one of my favorite series of puzzle games, and of all the ones I've played, it's pretty safe to say that this is the best one. Essentially, as far as the gameplay goes, multicolored orbs are falling from the top of the screen, and you have to collect orbs of the same color and then throw them back up to link them together and clear them from the screen. So in that way, I would say it's kind of like Puzzle Bobble, except you're not stationary. You can move all across the bottom of the screen. So especially if you're playing against a human opponent or the CPU on a higher difficulty level, the gameplay here can be very fast-paced and frantic. It's very fun. So yes, there's multiplayer, and there's an arcade mode where you play against other CPU-controlled characters, and there are a ton of characters to choose from. There are a couple of other modes to play as well, like an endless puzzle mode and a very cool board game mode where you can play against other players in that mode too. So gameplay-wise, this is just an extremely fun puzzle game, and it has a handful of gameplay modes to kind of mix it up a bit. The graphics are really good. I love the character designs in these games. Always have very kind of cute, chibi anime style. The soundtrack is excellent, very kind of like upbeat, catchy, the kind of music I guess you would want to play if you're playing like a fast-paced puzzle game like this one. It just really goes well with all the bright colors that are on screen at all times. Not just the characters, but also just the multicolored orbs and the effects that happen when you clear them away from the screen, all that kind of stuff. So everything taken into account, the graphics, the sound, the gameplay, this is legitimately one of my favorite puzzle games of all time. It's also not a terribly expensive game. If you decide to pick up the Saturn version, you can probably find it online for about $20, I would say, which I think it's well worth. Again, one of my favorite puzzle games, so if you are indeed a fan of puzzlers, Magical Drop 3 and the whole Magical Drop series really is one that I think you should be on the lookout for.
Magical Drop 3, very fun puzzler, very worth picking up and playing. I like it a lot. Next up, a game in a series of fighters with a very odd premise. This is Advanced Variable Geo.
And this is a game series that you may have already have heard of just because of the unusual plot, but essentially there's a fighting tournament being put on and all of the competitors are waitresses, and presumably whoever wins the tournament, they get a lot of publicity for the restaurant they work for and prize money as well, I guess. The original version was released for some manner of PC, and it was kind of like an X-rated game, so there was a stipulation in that game where the loser of a match had to strip bare naked, and if the other competitor wanted them to, they had to like masturbate in public or something. So yeah, it was kind of a naughty game. So when they ported it over to the Saturn, they took that part out. So now you just fight each other and that's it. But there was an anime also released to tie in with the game, and they did include some of the naughtier bits in that game. All that weird shit aside though, this is actually just a pretty decent playing fighting game. You have a bunch of different characters to choose from. It's nothing like terribly like original. It more or less plays like any other 2D fighter with sort of like Street Fighter style special moves, but it controls well for a fighting game that's really sells itself on its weird premise. It plays better than I was thinking it was going to. It's definitely, I would say, above mediocre. Not great, it's no Street Fighter Alpha 2, but it's still pretty good. And again, with just the weird premise, the characters, the graphics, all the different cutscenes, as there is a story mode. The music is also really good. All things considered, it's actually a game that is worth playing. A lot better than I thought it was going to be, and it's not a super expensive game to pick up either. Maybe around $30 or so if you go looking around on eBay. There's even a big box version that comes with a jigsaw puzzle if you want to be on the lookout for that. But Advanced Variable Geo, definitely I would say a better than mediocre fighting game with an odd premise, some good graphics, and a really good soundtrack. So if you're a 2D fighter fan and you're looking for some fighters for your Sega Saturn, I wouldn't say go for this one first, but definitely go for it if you're interested in maybe some out of the ordinary fighting action.
Advanced Variable Geo, very fun, quirky fighting title. Definitely worth a try if you're a fighter fan. Next up, an excellent shooter, but kind of an odd one. This is by Psikyo and Atlus. It is Saul Divided.
And I have to state, first of all, that pretty much any shooter by Psikyo is going to be one that's worth picking up and playing. This one is unique in that it tries to blend the shoot-'em-up genre with a little bit of fantasy RPG elements. So as you're playing, you'll collect items that will increase your max HP, and they'll give you back MP, because you can also collect magic attacks from enemies. Some of them, once you collect them one time, you have them for the rest of the game, and then some of them are one use only. The more powerful ones are one use only. You have 3 different characters to choose from, and each character has both a melee attack and a ranged attack, so their strengths vary from one to the other. So one might have a stronger melee attack with a sword, but their ranged attack is kind of weak. Whereas there's a young girl character who has like a magic wand, and her melee attacks are nothing impressive, but her ranged attacks are definitely better than the other two. The magic attacks are really cool as well. You get fire, ice, lightning, you get like instant death and slow time and all kinds of stuff like that. Lots of cool looking enemies, mostly like monsters, bats, skeletons, that kind of stuff. Really cool boss battles as well. The graphics are kind of hard for me to say. I like them, they look good, I like the character designs and everything, but they have kind of a wonky polygonal feel to them, however you describe it. It's 2D, but it feels like 3D that's been squished into a 2D format. So it looks good, but I think it would have looked a lot better if they would have just went with like straight 2D, like hand-drawn looking sprites, something like they did with like Sengoku Blade, for example. So it could be a better looking game, but it doesn't look bad at all. Again, the fantasy design is something that's really appealing to me. The soundtrack is also good. Again, it's a very fantasy style soundtrack, so it's a lot of like really orchestral sounds, lots of like wind and string instruments and things like that, lots of powerful drums. So for the kind of game it is, for the setting and the motif they were going for, the soundtrack is really fitting. So an all-around good game, definitely a very fun shooter. If you go look online, it's kind of pricey. I would say between $60 and $80 is usually what's being asked. But again, I like it a lot. If you love Psikyo shooters, if you especially love playing your shooters on your Sega Saturn, this is a unique one for sure, and definitely worth playing.
Saul Divided, kind of an oddball in the world of shooters, but one I like a lot. I would recommend playing that one. And last but not least, a great action RPG by Atlus. This is Princess Crown.
And I guess the easiest way to introduce this game is to say that it's essentially the precursor to Odin Sphere. So it is a side-scrolling hack and slash action RPG with a fantasy setting, and I absolutely love it. So as the princess, you'll travel around some very large maps. You go to lots of different locations like forests and caves and battlefields and towns. You'll fight all kinds of different fantasy creatures, monsters and dragons and things like that. You collect all these different items and magic spells, and you'll level up. And the whole plot is about defending your kingdom from this ultimate evil demonic overlord. And just when you take a simple core gameplay mechanic like action hack and slash games, which is something I really love, anything that's a 2D beat 'em up or hack and slash, I'm going to be into it. And then on top of that, you can put RPG elements and a really cool story and a fantasy setting and some beautiful graphics. This game has just an awesome hand-drawn look to it. I almost want to compare it to something like Legend of Mana or something like that. Just amazing graphics, amazing art design. I love all of the character and creature designs. The soundtrack is excellent too. It's another kind of orchestral sound that really mixes well with the sort of fantasy elements that this game has. Just overall an amazing game. If I was to compile like a top 10 list of my favorite Japan-only Saturn games, pretty sure this would be in there somewhere. It's really good. It is kind of a pricey game these days. It's become more and more popular, I guess, as years go by. So as of right now, I'd say at a minimum you're looking at like a $70 game, which is steep, but again, I do think this is one of the best games on the Saturn that didn't leave Japan. It's a lot of fun, great graphics, great sound. I really don't know what else to say about this one. The Princess Crown, it is awesome.
Princess Crown, absolutely amazing game. I like it a lot. And there you go, 5 more Japan exclusive Saturn games that I would recommend importing and playing. They're great. They definitely get my seal of approval, so I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching, everybody. Let me know down in the comments what some of your favorite import Saturn games are and what are some games on your wish list. I'd like to know, and until next time, take care, everybody. Goodbye.